The voices from the small building grew more urgent as the SEALs approached. Sarah could distinguish at least 3 different speakers. An older woman, a younger female voice, and what sounded like a child. None of them sounded like combatants preparing for a fight. Instead, she heard the unmistakable tone of people in distress, possibly trapped and certainly terrified by the explosions and gunfire that had just torn through their compound. Morrison held up his fist, signaling the team to halt. Through hand signals, he communicated his intention to have Sarah attempt verbal contact before they breached the door. This was exactly the kind of situation her training had prepared her for, where cultural understanding could prevent a tragedy or uncover crucial intelligence. "Salam alaikum," Sarah called out in Pashto, her voice carrying the traditional greeting across the night air. The response was immediate, frightened sobbing and rapid conversation between the women inside. Sarah could make out enough words to understand they were discussing whether to answer, whether the voice belonged to friend or enemy. "I am an American soldier," Sarah continued in Pashto, choosing her words carefully. "We are not here to hurt you. We are looking for the men who make bombs to hurt innocent people. Are you safe? Do you need help?" The conversation inside stopped abruptly, replaced by whispered consultation. After several tense minutes, an elderly woman's voice responded. "The men left hours ago. They heard helicopters and ran into the mountains. There are only women and children here now. Please do not hurt us," Sarah translated quickly for Morrison, who immediately adjusted the team's posture from assault to humanitarian assistance. The door to the building opened slowly, revealing an Afghan woman in her 60s wearing traditional dress. Behind her, Sarah could see 2 younger women and 3 small children huddled together. Their faces showed the terror of people caught in the middle of something they didn't understand and couldn't control. Sarah approached slowly, her weapon lowered but ready. She spoke softly in Pashto, explaining that they meant no harm but needed to search the building for dangerous materials. The elderly woman, who introduced herself as Bibi Gul, nodded with resignation. She had lived through decades of war and understood the futility of resistance. As Sarah began her search, Bibi Gul began to speak. Her words came slowly at first, then in a rush as she realized that this American woman could understand her language and might actually listen to what she had to say. The story she told changed everything about the mission. Ahmad Nazir was indeed the bomb maker they were hunting, but he was also Bibi Gul's nephew. She had watched him transform from a schoolteacher into a killer, poisoned by years of conflict and the loss of his own family, to what he believed was American aggression. More importantly, she knew where he had gone and why he had left so suddenly. "He received a message tonight," Bibi Gul explained, glancing nervously at the SEALs who were securing the area. "There is to be a big attack tomorrow. Many American soldiers will die if you do not stop it. He went to the valley below to prepare the bombs." Sarah's blood ran cold. Intelligence had focused so intently on capturing Nazir that they had missed signs of an imminent large-scale attack. She immediately relayed this information to Morrison, who contacted headquarters for guidance while maintaining security around the compound. The youngest woman in the group, barely 18 years old, stepped forward hesitantly. She spoke in broken English mixed with Pashto, revealing that she had attended school before the Taliban banned girls' education. "American lady," she said, her voice shaking, "my brother. He is not bad, man. War make him crazy. Maybe you save him too." This revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. The young woman was Nazir's sister, and despite everything he had done, she still loved him and hoped for his redemption. It was a reminder of the human complexity that existed beneath every military operation. The families torn apart by conflict and ideology. Morrison gathered his team for a quick planning session. The mission parameters had changed completely. Instead of a simple capture operation, they now had intelligence about an imminent attack that could kill dozens of American soldiers. They also had potential local assets who might be willing to help prevent the attack if handled correctly. Sarah found herself at the center of a rapidly evolving situation. Her language skills and cultural knowledge were no longer just support elements. They were becoming the key to mission success. Bibi Gul was willing to help locate her nephew, but only if Sarah could guarantee that he would be captured alive rather than killed. "He is lost, but he is not evil," the elderly woman insisted. "The Taliban filled his head with poison after his wife and children died in bombing. Maybe American justice better than Taliban justice. Maybe he can find peace in prison instead of death. The moral complexity of the situation was staggering. Nazir was responsible for killing American soldiers, but he was also a victim of the same cycle of violence that had consumed Afghanistan for generations. Sarah understood that her decisions in the next few hours could influence not just the immediate mission, but potentially save lives on both sides of the conflict. Morrison made the call to higher command, requesting permission to use the Afghan women as sources for the developing intelligence picture. The response was swift: find Nazir and stop the planned attack by any means necessary. The rules of engagement remained the same, but the stakes had increased dramatically. As dawn approached, Sarah prepared for the most challenging phase of her military career. She would have to balance her duty as an American soldier with her role as a cultural bridge, working with Afghan civilians to prevent a terrorist attack while trying to preserve the possibility of justice rather than vengeance. The Daiki compound that had seemed like the end of the mission was actually just the beginning of something much more complex and dangerous. The desert heat shimmered like liquid glass across the Afghan landscape as Master Chief Sarah Chen adjusted her night vision goggles. She had been deployed to Helmand Province for 3 months now, serving as a cultural support team member attached to SEAL Team 7. The mission briefing earlier that morning had been straightforward: neutralize a high-value target suspected of coordinating IED attacks against coalition forces. Sarah's role was unique in the special operations community. As one of the first women officially assigned to work alongside Navy SEALs in combat operations, she carried the weight of breaking barriers while proving herself in the most demanding military environment imaginable. Her background in intelligence and fluency in Pashto made her invaluable for gathering information from local women and children who would never speak to male soldiers. The compound they were approaching sat on a hill, overlooking a strategic valley. Intelligence reports indicated that Ahmad Nazir, a Taliban bomb maker responsible for killing dozens of American soldiers, was hiding inside with several armed guards. The SEALs had been tracking him for weeks, and tonight they finally had actionable intelligence on his location. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison, the team leader, signaled for the squad to halt. Through her earpiece, Sarah heard his voice crackling with tension. Overwatch reports movement in the target building. At least 6 military-age males confirmed inside. The team consisted of 12 elite operators, each trained for scenarios exactly like this one. Sarah checked her equipment one final time. Her rifle was loaded and ready, but her primary weapons were her mind and her ability to communicate. She carried medical supplies, zip-tie restraints, and a tablet loaded with photographs of known insurgents. Her job was to secure any women and children, gather intelligence, and provide cultural context that might prevent the mission from escalating unnecessarily. The compound was surrounded by a high mud brick wall typical of Afghan family homes. Intelligence suggested it had been converted into a safe house for Taliban operatives. Drone footage showed multiple entry points, but the main gate appeared to be heavily fortified. The SEALs would breach from 3 directions simultaneously, overwhelming any resistance before the targets could escape or destroy evidence. As they moved into position, Sarah noticed something the initial reconnaissance had missed. Laundry hung on a line in the courtyard, including small children's clothing. Her heart rate increased. The presence of families always complicated missions like this. Rules of engagement were clear, but split-second decisions in darkness could mean the difference between mission success and civilian casualties. Romeo 6. This is Bravo 2, Sarah whispered into her radio using Morrison's call sign. I'm seeing indicators of family presence. Recommend we proceed with enhanced caution protocols. Morrison's response was immediate and professional. The SEALs were trained to adapt quickly to changing circumstances, and Sarah's observations were valued by the entire team. The approach to the compound took 40 minutes of careful movement across open ground. Each step had to be calculated to avoid triggering any improvised explosive devices that might be protecting the approaches. Sarah stayed in the middle of the formation, protected by the SEALs while remaining close enough to be effective once they breached the compound. At 0300 hours, the assault began. Explosive charges blew open the main gate, while teams simultaneously breached the side entrances. Flashbang grenades illuminated the courtyard in brilliant white light. designed to disorient anyone inside without causing permanent damage. Sarah followed the breach team through the main entrance, her senses heightened by adrenaline and training. The compound was larger than expected, with multiple buildings connected by covered walkways. Shouts in Pashto echoed from various directions as the SEALs moved methodically through each structure. Sarah's job was to follow the clearing teams and secure any non-combatants while searching for intelligence materials. In the first building, they found sleeping quarters with evidence of recent occupation. Warm tea glasses and scattered clothing suggested the occupants had fled recently, possibly warned by lookouts they hadn't detected. Sarah photographed documents and personal items that might provide leads to other insurgent cells operating in the region. The second building yielded more promising results. Hidden beneath a false floor, they discovered a cache of bomb-making materials, including timers, detonators, and enough explosive material to create dozens of roadside bombs. This was definitely the right location. But where was Ahmad Nazir? Morrison's voice crackled through the radio. Target building secured. No sign of primary objective. Continuing search of remaining structures. Sarah could hear the frustration in his voice. Intelligence had been so confident about Nazir's presence, but special operations had taught everyone that plans rarely survived contact with reality. As they moved toward the third building, Sarah noticed fresh footprints in the dust leading toward a small structure at the back of the compound. The prints were small, suggesting either a woman or a child had recently passed this way. She alerted Morrison, who redirected 2 SEALs to investigate while the main team continued clearing the larger buildings. The night was becoming more complicated with each passing minute. What had seemed like a straightforward capture mission was evolving into something requiring patience, cultural sensitivity, and split-second decision-making. Sarah understood that her presence on this team represented more than just operational necessity. She was proving that women could contribute to the most dangerous and important missions in the American military. The sound of voices speaking rapidly in Pashto drifted from the small building. Sarah strained to listen, picking up fragments of conversation that suggested fear and confusion rather than hostile intent. Someone inside was scared, possibly trapped, and definitely not a threat to the assault team. As they approached the final structure, Sarah's training and instincts told her that the most critical moments of the mission were still ahead. The real test of her abilities, and the success of the entire operation, was about to begin in ways that none of them could have anticipated. Dawn broke over the Afghan mountains with the harsh clarity that only comes in desert climates. Sarah had spent the remaining hours of darkness working with Bibi Gul to understand the geography of the valley where Nazir had fled. The elderly woman drew maps in the dust marking caves, paths, and traditional hiding places that had sheltered fighters for generations. Morrison received updated orders from command. A convoy of American supply trucks was scheduled to travel through the valley in 6 hours. Intelligence now confirmed that this convoy was the target of Nazir's planned attack. The mission had evolved from capture to counter-terrorism, with civilian lives hanging in the balance. Bibi Gul's information was proving invaluable, but it came with conditions that tested everyone's patience. She would only help if her nephew could be taken alive, and she insisted on accompanying the team to talk him into surrendering. Morrison initially rejected this proposal as too dangerous, but Sarah convinced him that having Bibi Gul present might be their only chance of avoiding a firefight that could result in Nazir's death. The terrain Bibi Gul described was treacherous. Narrow mountain paths overlooking deep ravines, with dozens of caves that could hide a small group of insurgents. Traditional military tactics would require air support and overwhelming force. But that approach would likely result in Nazir's death and the loss of critical intelligence about his network. Sarah found herself designing a new kind of mission, one that combined special operations tactics with cultural diplomacy. The plan she proposed was risky. A small team would approach Nazir's suspected location while Bibi Gul used a megaphone to appeal to him in Pashto. If he agreed to surrender, they would take him alive. If he refused, the SEALs would neutralize the threat using minimum necessary force. The young woman who had identified herself as Nazir's sister, Mariam, also wanted to join the mission. She believed her brother might listen to family members where he would ignore military commands. Morrison was adamant that 2 civilians were too many, but Sarah argued that family connections might be the only thing capable of reaching a man who had already decided to die for his cause. As they prepared to leave the compound, Sarah noticed something that changed her understanding of the entire situation. Hidden among Mariam's possessions was a cell phone with recent text messages in English. The young woman had been communicating with someone at Bagram Airfield, providing information about Taliban activities in the region. Mariam was already working as an informant for American intelligence. The revelation explained how intelligence had known about Nazir's location and activities. It also explained why Mariam spoke English and seemed comfortable around American soldiers. She had been risking her life for months, gathering information that had saved American lives while living under the same roof as her bomb-making brother. Sarah confronted Mariam privately, speaking in rapid Pashto to avoid alerting the SEALs before she understood the full situation. Mariam's story poured out in whispered confessions. She had been recruited by American intelligence officers months earlier, after her brother's transformation into a Taliban bomb maker had horrified her. She had been feeding information about insurgent activities while praying for an opportunity to save her brother's soul. "I love my country, but I love peace more," Mariam explained, tears streaming down her face. "My brother is killing innocent people because he thinks all Americans are evil. I know this is not true. I have seen American soldiers help our people, build schools, bring medicine. Maybe if he sees this too, he can find another path." The mission was becoming more complicated by the hour, but also more hopeful. Instead of simply hunting a terrorist, they were now working with Afghan allies who shared their goal of preventing violence and saving lives. Sarah realized that this was what victory in Afghanistan actually looked like. Not military conquest, but building relationships that could transcend ideology and hatred. Morrison approved the modified plan after consulting with headquarters. The convoy would be delayed by 2 hours, giving them time to locate Nazir and attempt negotiation before resorting to lethal force. A helicopter would provide overwatch and extraction capability, but would remain at a distance to avoid escalating the situation. The approach to the valley took 3 hours of careful movement through terrain that seemed designed to hide insurgents. Ancient smuggler paths wound between massive boulders and through narrow canyons that could conceal entire armies. Sarah began to understand why Afghanistan had defeated so many invading forces throughout history. The landscape itself was a fortress. Bibi Gul proved to be surprisingly capable for a woman in her 60s. She navigated the mountain paths with the confidence of someone who had spent her entire life in this terrain. Her knowledge of local customs and family connections also provided insights that no amount of military intelligence could have generated. As they approached the area where Nazir was suspected to be hiding, Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. The success or failure of this mission would depend largely on her ability to facilitate communication between people who had every reason to mistrust each other. The stakes were higher than just one convoy or one terrorist. They were attempting to prove that understanding and compassion could be more powerful than hatred and violence. Morrison signaled for the team to halt as they reached a ridge overlooking the suspected cave complex. Through binoculars, they could see movement in the shadows below. Someone was definitely present, and recent tracks suggested a group of at least 4 people had passed through the area recently. Sarah checked her equipment one final time, knowing that the next few hours would test everything she had learned about warfare, diplomacy, and human nature. The mission that had begun as a simple raid was about to become something much more significant, a test of whether enemies could become allies when they shared common goals. The cave complex below stretched along the mountainside like a honeycomb, each entrance potentially hiding armed insurgents or innocent shepherds. Sarah studied the terrain through her scope, noting the strategic advantages that had made this location attractive to fighters for centuries. Multiple escape routes, clear sight lines down the valley, and natural fortification made it nearly impossible to assault without significant casualties. Morrison positioned his team along the ridge, creating overlapping fields of fire, while maintaining enough distance to avoid triggering an immediate firefight. The plan required patience and precision. Bibi Gul would call out to her nephew from a protected position, while Mariam would use the megaphone to appeal to his humanity. If those efforts failed, the SEALs would have clear shots to neutralize the threat. Sarah felt the weight of the moment as she helped Bibi Gul prepare for what might be her final conversation with her nephew. The elderly woman clutched a small prayer book, whispering verses from the Quran that spoke of forgiveness and redemption. Despite everything Nazir had done, she still believed in the possibility of his salvation. He was not always like this, Bibi Gul said quietly, looking down at the caves where her nephew was hiding. Before the war took everything from him, he taught children to read. He believed education could lift our people from poverty. The Taliban convinced him that Americans would destroy our culture. But maybe today he can see the truth. The first attempt at contact came from Mariam, who used the megaphone to call out in Pashto, "Ahmad, this is your sister. I know you are frightened and angry, but please listen to me. There are people here who want to help you find another way. You do not have to die today." The response was immediate. Automatic weapons fire erupting from multiple cave entrances. Bullets ricocheted off rocks around their position, forcing everyone to take cover. Morrison's voice crackled through the radio. "Contact! Multiple shooters in the cave complex. Request permission to return fire." Sarah grabbed Morrison's arm before he could give the order to engage. "Wait, they're shooting high over our heads. If they wanted to kill us, we'd already be dead. This is intimidation, not a real attack." She was right. The bullet impacts were consistently striking rocks several feet above their position, suggesting the shooters were deliberately missing. Bibi Gul stood up despite the gunfire, her voice carrying across the valley with surprising strength. "Ahmad, this is your grandmother speaking. I raised you when your parents died. I taught you the difference between right and wrong. The Americans with me are not your enemies. They want to stop you from killing innocent people, but they also want to save your life." The gunfire stopped abruptly. In the sudden silence, they could hear voices arguing in the caves below. Sarah strained to listen, picking up fragments of heated conversation between Nazir and his companions. Someone was advocating for continued resistance, while another voice urged negotiation. Mariam tried again, her voice breaking with emotion. "Brother, I know you think I have betrayed our family by helping the Americans, but I have seen what their real mission is. They build schools for our children. They bring medicine to our sick. They are not the monsters the Taliban described to you." This time the response came not in gunfire but in words. Nazir's voice echoed from the largest cave, speaking in Pashto but clearly audible to everyone on the ridge. "Sister, you have been poisoned by their lies. They kill our people with drones and bombs, then pretend to care about our children. I will not surrender to become their propaganda tool." Sarah realized this was her moment. She stood up slowly, keeping her weapon lowered but visible, and spoke in clear Pashto. "Ahmad Nazir, I am an American soldier, but I am also a woman who understands loss. I know you became a fighter because war took your family from you. But killing more innocent people will not bring them back. It will only create more orphans like the children you once taught." The silence that followed lasted several minutes. Sarah could feel the tension radiating from the SEALs around her. Trained killers who were allowing diplomacy to take precedence over overwhelming force. This was exactly the kind of scenario that their training had prepared them for. But it still required tremendous discipline to trust in negotiation when violence offered more certain results. When Nazir spoke again, his voice carried a different tone. "American woman, you speak our language, but do you understand our pain? My wife and daughters died in an airstrike that your military called collateral damage. How can you ask me to trust the same people who destroyed my reason for living?" Sarah felt the weight of that question. She couldn't undo the tragedy that had created this enemy, but she could try to prevent it from creating more tragedy. "I cannot bring back your family, Ahmad, but I can promise you that killing innocent truck drivers will not honor their memory. Your grandmother and sister still love you. They are willing to risk their lives to save yours. Does that mean nothing to you?" The conversation was interrupted by Morrison's radio crackling with an urgent update. "Romeo 6, this is Overwatch. We have movement on the valley floor. Large group approaching from the south, appears to be additional insurgents coming to reinforce the cave position." Sarah's heart sank. The arrival of reinforcements would transform this delicate negotiation into a full-scale firefight. Any chance of taking Nazir alive would disappear in the chaos of combat. Worse, the additional fighters would likely include hardline Taliban members who would never consider surrender. Bibi Gul must have understood the implications, because she made a decision that shocked everyone present. She stood up from behind her protective cover and began walking down the slope toward the caves, calling out to her nephew in a voice that carried absolute authority. "Ahmad, I am coming to you. If you want to kill Americans, you will have to kill your grandmother first. Morrison's immediate instinct was to stop her, but Sarah grabbed his radio before he could order the woman back to safety. "Let her go," Sarah whispered urgently. "This is our only chance. If we try to stop her now, we lose any possibility of peaceful resolution." The SEALs watched in amazement as an elderly Afghan woman walked fearlessly into a terrorist stronghold, armed with nothing but family love and moral authority. It was either the bravest thing they had ever witnessed or the most foolish. In the next few minutes they would discover which. Bibi Gul's slow descent down the rocky slope created a moment of absolute silence that seemed to suspend the laws of warfare itself. Sarah watched through her scope as the elderly woman navigated the treacherous terrain with careful steps, her traditional dress flowing behind her like a flag of truce. The approaching reinforcements had stopped their advance, apparently as confused by this development as everyone else. Morrison's team maintained their positions but held their fire, creating an unprecedented situation where a grandmother's moral authority was providing protection in an active combat zone. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat as she watched Bibi Gul approach the cave entrance where her nephew was hiding with at least 3 other armed insurgents. "Ahmad," Bibi Gul called out when she reached the base of the cliff. "I am here. Come out and speak with the grandmother who raised you. If you have truly become the monster the Taliban wanted you to be, then kill me now and be done with it." The psychological impact of her words was immediate. Sarah could hear movement and urgent conversation from inside the caves. Nazir's companions were clearly uncomfortable with the idea of harming an elderly woman, especially one with such obvious family connections to their leader. This was exactly the kind of moral complexity that could fracture the resolve of men who had been trained to see the world in simple terms of us versus them. After several tense minutes, a figure emerged from the largest cave. Ahmad Nazir was younger than Sarah had expected, probably in his early 30s with the lean build of someone who had spent months living rough in the mountains. He carried an AK-47 but kept it pointed toward the ground as he approached his grandmother. Sarah could see the conflict written across his face even from her position on the ridge. This was a man torn between loyalty to his cause and love for his family, between desire for vengeance and respect for the woman who had shaped his childhood. The Taliban had trained him to hate, but they couldn't erase decades of family bonds. "Grandmother," Nazir said, his voice carrying clearly in the mountain air. "You should not have come here. This place is not safe for you. The Americans will kill us all when they tire of talking." Bibi Gul reached out and touched her nephew's face with the tenderness that only comes from unconditional love. "Child, I have lived through Soviet occupation, civil war, and Taliban rule. I have buried 3 sons and 2 husbands. I am not afraid of death, but I am afraid of watching you throw away your soul for revenge that will never satisfy the emptiness in your heart." Sarah realized she was witnessing something extraordinary, a moment where love was more powerful than ideology, where family connections transcended political divisions. This was the kind of breakthrough that intelligence officers and diplomats dreamed about, but rarely achieved in practice. The conversation between grandmother and grandson continued in rapid Pashto, but Sarah could follow enough to understand that Bibi Gul was systematically dismantling every justification Nazir had constructed for his path of violence. She spoke of his dead wife and children, reminding him that they would not want their memory used to justify killing innocent people. She talked about the children he had once taught, asking whether he wanted them to remember him as a teacher or as a terrorist. Morrison's radio crackled with another update from Overwatch. "Romeo 6. The reinforcement group has moved to within 500 meters and appears to be setting up firing positions. Estimate 8 to 10 additional fighters. Recommend immediate extraction of friendly personnel from the kill zone." The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly, but the negotiation was at its most critical point. Sarah made a decision that would have seemed impossible at the beginning of this mission. She stood up from her protected position and began walking down the slope to join Bibi Gul and Nazir. "Chen, what the hell are you doing?" Morrison's voice carried both authority and concern through her earpiece. "Building trust," Sarah replied, never breaking stride. "If we want him to surrender, someone has to show faith that negotiation is possible." Miriam immediately followed her sister-in-law down the slope, creating a surreal scene where 2 women were walking into a terrorist stronghold while elite soldiers provided overwatch. The approaching Taliban reinforcements had apparently decided to wait and see what developed before committing to combat. When Sarah reached the cave entrance, She found herself face to face with one of America's most wanted terrorists. Nazir studied her with intelligent eyes that showed both suspicion and curiosity. She could see the teacher he had once been, buried beneath the hardened exterior of a man who had chosen violence as his response to grief. "You are the American woman who speaks our language," Nazir said in English, switching languages as if to demonstrate his own intelligence and education. "My sister says you understand our culture. Tell me, do you also understand justice? Do you know what it means to watch your family burn while your enemies call it an accident?" Sarah met his gaze directly, knowing that this moment would determine whether the mission ended in surrender or bloodshed. "I understand that justice and vengeance are not the same thing," she replied in Pashto, choosing his native language to show respect. "I understand that your family's death was a tragedy that no amount of killing can undo. But I also understand that the American convoy you plan to attack today contains medics carrying medicine for Afghan children. How is their death justice for your family?" The question hit Nazir like a physical blow. Sarah could see him processing the implications, that his planned attack would kill people whose mission was to help rather than harm. The cognitive dissonance was written across his features as he struggled to reconcile his image of Americans as occupiers with the reality of humanitarian aid workers. Bibi Gul seized the moment of uncertainty. "Ahmad, look around you. Do you see conquerors or do you see people trying to prevent more death? The American woman came down here with no protection except faith that you still have honor. Your sister risked her life to save yours. Even now, when you could kill us all, you choose to talk instead of fight. This is not the behavior of a monster." The sound of gunfire erupted from the valley below as the Taliban reinforcements engaged with what appeared to be another American unit that had moved to intercept them. The negotiation had run out of time, and everyone would have to choose sides in the next few seconds. The gunfire from the valley below shattered the delicate moment of negotiation like glass hitting concrete. Sarah watched Nazir's face as he processed the sound of combat, seeing the internal struggle between his terrorist training and the family bonds that Bibi Gul had awakened. The approaching Taliban reinforcements were engaged with American forces, which meant the window for peaceful resolution was closing rapidly. "Ahmad, you must choose now," Bibi Gul said urgently, gripping her nephew's arm. "Fight with the Taliban and die as a terrorist, or surrender, and live to see if there might be another path forward. Your friends below will be dead within the hour. Do not join them in pointless martyrdom." Sarah could hear Morrison's voice in her earpiece, reporting the tactical situation to headquarters, while simultaneously coordinating with the other American unit that had intercepted the Taliban reinforcements. The SEALs on the ridge were maintaining their overwatch positions, but everyone understood that combat could erupt at any second. Nazir looked toward the sounds of fighting, then back at his grandmother, his sister, and the American woman who had risked her life to talk rather than fight. Sarah could see the exact moment when years of indoctrination cracked under the weight of human connection. His shoulders sagged as if an enormous burden had been lifted, and he slowly lowered his weapon to the ground. "I cannot kill my grandmother," he said quietly, speaking in English so Sarah would understand every word. "And I cannot kill my sister who loves me despite everything I have become. If this makes me weak in the eyes of Allah, then I will accept his judgment." He turned toward the cave entrance and called out in Pashto to his companions. "Put down your weapons. We surrender to the Americans." The response from inside the cave was immediate and hostile. Two of Nazir's companions emerged with weapons raised, shouting about cowardice and betrayal. Sarah instinctively moved to protect Bibi Gul while reaching for her own weapon, but Nazir stepped between his grandmother and the angry insurgents. "She is an old woman who has suffered enough," Nazir said firmly to his men. "If you want to fight, fight the soldiers on the ridge. But you will not harm my family." The moral authority in his voice was unmistakable, and Sarah realized that even among terrorists, leadership and respect mattered more than ideology. Morrison's voice crackled through Sarah's earpiece. "Chen, we have multiple friendlies in the kill zone. Clear the area immediately or we'll have to engage through your position." The SEALs were in an impossible situation. Their rules of engagement required them to neutralize the threat, but doing so would likely kill the civilians they were trying to protect. Sarah made a decision that violated every tactical principle she had been taught. Instead of seeking cover, she stepped forward and addressed Nazir's companions in Pashto. "The fighting below will be over soon. Your reinforcements are outnumbered and outgunned. You can die here for nothing, or you can surrender and live to see your families again. Ahmad has made his choice. What is yours? The psychological impact of hearing their leader referred to by his first name, spoken with obvious familiarity, was profound. These men had followed Ahmad Nazir because they believed in his cause and respected his commitment. If he was surrendering, their own position became untenable both tactically and morally. After several tense moments, the insurgents began laying down their weapons. The transformation was remarkable. Men who had been prepared to die fighting Americans were now sitting on the ground with their hands visible, following the lead of a commander who had chosen family over ideology. Sarah immediately radioed Morrison. Overwatch, this is Chen. We have full surrender of all hostiles in the cave complex. Request medical team and detention team for processing. The relief in Morrison's response was audible as he acknowledged that the most dangerous phase of the mission had ended without additional casualties. The sound of gunfire from the valley had stopped, indicating that the Taliban reinforcements had either been neutralized or had withdrawn. Sarah learned later that the intercepting force had been a Marine unit that had been diverted from their original mission when intelligence detected the converging insurgent groups. The coordination between different military units had prevented what could have been a much larger confrontation. As SEAL team members descended from the ridge to secure the prisoners, Sarah found herself in the strange position of mediating between American Special Forces and surrendering terrorists. Nazir specifically requested that he be allowed to speak with Sarah before being taken into custody, a request that Morrison approved after consulting with headquarters. American woman, Nazir said, using zip-tie restraints while speaking quietly so only Sarah could hear. I want you to know that I am not surrendering because I believe your government is righteous. I am surrendering because my grandmother reminded me that hatred is a poison that destroys the one who carries it. Perhaps in your prisons I can find a way to honor my family's memory without creating more orphans. Sarah nodded, understanding that this was as close to an apology as she was likely to receive from a man who had spent months planning to kill her fellow soldiers. Ahmad, I hope you find the peace you're looking for. Your grandmother and sister will be protected, and they'll be allowed to visit you during your detention. The intelligence gathered from the cave complex proved to be even more valuable than the capture of Nazir himself. Hidden among the bomb-making materials were detailed plans for attacks throughout the region, contact information for other terrorist cells, and most importantly, evidence of Pakistani support for Taliban operations in Afghanistan. The information would lead to dozens of additional operations over the following months. Bibi Gul approached Sarah as the prisoners were being prepared for extraction. The elderly woman's eyes were filled with tears, but her voice was steady as she spoke. Thank you for giving my grandson a chance to remember who he used to be. The Americans I have met today are not the monsters the Taliban described. Perhaps there is hope for peace if more people can see beyond their hatred. Miriam would continue working as an intelligence asset for American forces. Her cover story now enhanced by her public role in her brother's surrender. Her information would save countless lives over the following year, proving that the most effective weapons against terrorism were often relationships and understanding. Rather than bullets and bombs, the convoy that had been the target of Nazir's planned attack proceeded through the valley safely later that day, carrying medical supplies to villages that had been cut off from healthcare for months. The irony was not lost on Sarah. By preventing the attack, they had ensured that Afghan children would receive the medicine they needed to survive. As the helicopters carried the prisoners and the SEAL team back to base, Sarah reflected on the mission that had challenged every assumption she had held about warfare and diplomacy. They had achieved complete mission success without firing a shot in anger, proving that understanding and communication could be more powerful than overwhelming force. Morrison found Sarah during the flight back and spoke quietly over the helicopter noise. Chen, what happened down there was either the luckiest outcome in military history or the most brilliant piece of unconventional warfare I've ever witnessed. Either way, you saved a lot of lives today. On both sides. The mission report would become required reading at special operations schools, studied as an example of how cultural understanding and human connection could achieve objectives that traditional military tactics could not. Sarah's approach would influence training programs and mission planning for years to come, proving that the most effective warriors were sometimes those who knew when not to fight. 6 months later, Ahmad Nazir would provide testimony that led to the dismantling of the largest Taliban bomb-making network in southern Afghanistan. His information would save hundreds of American and Afghan lives, transforming him from one of America's most wanted terrorists into one of its most valuable intelligence assets. The teacher who had become a killer had found a way to honor his family's memory by preventing other families from experiencing the same loss. The mission, that began with the simple objective of capturing a terrorist, had ended by demonstrating that even in the chaos of war, human connections could transcend hatred and create possibilities for redemption that no one had thought possible.